Hey y'all, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to the No-Till Market Garden Podcast, episode 7. Got a great episode for you this week. I was joined by Yosef Camire of Ahavah Farm outside of Colorado Springs, and we talked about no-till gardening, his very cool Johnson Sioux bioreactor-inspired composting system, a pay-what-you-can model for his CSA, water rights issues. It's a pretty wide-ranging but incredibly inspiring chat. Also, we talk about the Fodder Tech. If you know what that is, Ahavah has one. If you don't, you're about to learn something. And I have to say, I got to hang out a bunch with Yosef and his oldest son, Asher, at the Acres Conference last week, and we had a lot of fun. I have a ton of respect for Yosef and what he and his family are doing on the farm. Coming from an engineering background, Yosef is incredibly smart, pragmatic, and knowledgeable. This was just a really cool conversation, and I'm excited to have gotten to know Yosef since. But before we get into it, this episode is brought to you by you. Yeah, please subscribe to the podcast. Leave a review on iTunes, share it with your friends on your social media and in your farming groups. And if you want to take it just one step further, consider joining the Patreon page. There are discounts to future events, some bonus material, and it helps keep this podcast going. That's patreon.com/farmerjesse, or link is in the show notes. Okay, let's get to the interview. Here's Yosef Camire of Ahavah Farm. Yosef Camire, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jesse.
Absolutely. So maybe we could just start with you talking a little bit about Ahavah, how much acreage you have there, and where you're selling your produce, those sorts of things.
Yeah, sure. Just a basic rundown of what our farm is. So the name of our farm, as you just said, is Ahavah Farm, and it's a Jewish farm. We're a Jewish family, and so the word is a Hebrew word which actually means love. And we always say, like in our logo and everything, it's Ahavah Farm, local, sustainable, pure. And so this all kind of works together with our name and the way that we named the farm, and I think it's kind of important to talk about that because it envelops our mission. And that is, the word Ahavah, like I said, means love, but not the same kind of love that I think most people are used to, because in English, it's very broad, right? Like you love cookies, you love your grandma, you love your wife, you love your little daughter, you love your dog. In Hebrew, it's not like that. The word Ahavah literally means to give of yourself. And so, which I think is a really awesome definition of what love is and the way that we should be living our lives. And so it's Ahavah, give of yourself farm, pretty much. And it's the three pillars: local, sustainable, pure. Giving of ourselves to local community, things like in local ministry, or not ministry, I shouldn't say ministry because that's like a very religious term, but it's not. We don't run our farm as a Jewish farm, we just happen to be Jewish. And so it's giving yourself to the local community. We have a pay what you can afford system. We have a non-profit organization. We do a lot of education in the area. We do a lot of donations, et cetera. So that's a local part. So we give of ourselves to the local community, not just as a farm, but in any way that we can do so. Sustainability, local sustainable, the second one. That's pretty obvious. But we take it to another level, and that is we're regenerative. And so we're 100% solar powered. We don't use any tractors. We no-till. We take it to another extreme. We're biological farmers. We don't use any inputs at all. Any kind of an input that we put on our farm is stuff that we can grow through biology or through compost. And so we don't use anything there. So we take sustainability very, very, very seriously. And then the last part is pure, and that kind of ties everything together because it's not just about the pure food, which is huge, because we absolutely, like I said, we don't use anything, even something that's quote unquote certified organic. We don't use those chemicals because chemicals are chemicals, even if they're organic. We don't use any pesticides. We use all beneficial insects. We use companion planting and things like that. So we take it to kind of another level of sustainability or regenerative stewardship. And then the purity Not using any chemicals, not using any inputs, but also purity in everything that we do, whether it's interactions with our employees, whether it's interactions with the community, whether it's interactions, business dealings, taxes, whatever. Like everything we do, purity first, local, sustainable, all of that kind of pulls together of who we are as a farm, and we stand by that. So every decision that we make has got to stand on those two pillars. So if we're going to buy a hoop house, we say, okay, does this affect positively or negatively the local aspect of our farm? Does this affect positively or negatively the sustainability or the purity? And so if any of those are in the negative, we don't make the decision. So we really stand by those principles, and that's kind of who we are as a farm. We have about 600 chickens, and so we only use those for eggs. And we, don't light their coops. We don't heat their coops. We don't force molt them. We don't give them a high protein diet to burn out their livers or anything like that. We allow them to live, 100% free lives. They're completely free range. They have shelter that we close at night, open in the morning. And so they're very, very pure eggs. We don't give them any corn or soy. It's all like certified organic, any kind of grain that we give them. But we also have a fodder system, which kind of helps close that loop. And so we feed them off of, again, things that we can grow ourselves. We get the grain locally, and then we feed the chickens. We also have some alpacas and a horse for biodiversity, and the horse is actually my son's, but that's not really for the farm. And then we also have, right now we're growing on 1.38 acres exactly. And that includes all the walkways and the extra space in there. We own 40, but on that 1.38 acres, we do this year we did 76,000 pounds of food, without tractors, without tilling. And that takes care of a 230 member CSA that is 4 seasons all year long. And this is the first year going into but then going into the spring and forevermore that we're not going to be doing any farmers markets. So in years past, we did a CSA plus 2 farmers markets and restaurants and grocery stores. We're not doing any of that. We're going to be 100% CSA, and that includes, special classes, special discounts. We're also using different vendors in the area, Colorado Springs and in Denver, like that sell bread and soaps. And we even have like lawyers and different kind of businesses that offer certain kind of discounts and things like that for members only. And so it's really kind of a club, if you will, and we have lots of events and stuff like that. So we've created this amazing community of CSA members, and it's been a beautiful, beautiful thing. So we started in 2014 is when we moved here, and we've just been building ever since, and so that's where we're at now. I don't know if that tells you everything you need to know. It was a lot.
No, that's great. That's so many. I have a lot of questions, but there was a lot of really cool information in there. So, do you have a history of farming? Like, did you start out? You said 2014 is when you started the farm. Were you guys interning before that, or did you grow up farming, or what's the story there? What's your history with it?
No, not at all. When we started, I was an engineer, and gosh, I barely knew how to garden. And so when we moved down to Peyton, Colorado, it's 20 minutes outside of Colorado Springs, that's where we're located. We really moved here for the family, and we wanted to kind of homestead, if you will, and garden and all that stuff, even though we didn't really know what we were doing. And so we moved here. The house was in shambles. So remember, 2014. At that time, we had 4 children, all young, all very young, and I was a full-time engineer. So that means we had no plumbing, we had no electrical, we had no roof, we had a roof, but we needed a new one. Windows, literally had no kitchen, but the house had no kitchen, had no bathrooms. You walk in, there's just pipes sticking out of the floor. And then the whole property, the 40 acres, was just a disaster. So we moved in September 2017, September 2014, and we just worked our tails off getting the house ready and all that stuff. While we were doing all that, and I was working full-time and taking care of 4 children, we started a quarter-acre sized garden. Now, being an idiot, I had no idea that was way too much for my family until we had a local composting company come out and dump some compost. And when they did, they said, "What are you doing? Starting a farm?" I said, "What are you, nuts? This is just for me. This is just a small garden. What are you talking about?" He said, "No, you can feed 40 people on this little plot here." I'm like, "Oh, okay, whatever, buddy." Kind of dismissed him. That same winter, I picked up a book that, he put a bug in my ear. So I picked up a book by J.M. Fortier. Everybody knows this book, The Market Gardener. And kind of rocked my world a little bit. I got a little excited about it. And my wife convinced us to do a small CSA and a small farmer's market. So we did a 10-member CSA that first year. So that was the summer of 2015. We had one 40-foot hoop house, 40 by 20-foot hoop house that we put up over the winter. And we got started, and we went to the farmer's market, and I remember telling my wife, like, hey, because I'm an engineer, right, so I didn't need the money. And so I was like, hey, if we make $100 at this market, I'm going to be tickled pink, right? Like, I'm just be happy as heck. Well, we made $183 at market, which really blew us away. It was really exciting. And it was funny because I just recently on my Instagram just posted our first and last farmer's markets ever. And it's incredible how far we've come, because boy, when I look back at that first table, there was like 4 or 5 items on it, and it was just amazing that I made $183. And I'll never forget that number, because I called my dad right up from the market, and I was like, hey, Dad, I made $183 at the market. You wouldn't believe it. He said, I didn't know you could do that. I said, I didn't know you could do that either. So I had no idea what I was doing. I failed to mention that in that same winter when I picked up the J.M. Fortier book, after I read that, I read 17 more books that winter on teaching myself how to farm, and the economics of farming and all of that stuff. So I was very well read before we started. So that's my background, and then from there, I mean, we've grown. I don't know what the complete price. It's like 1,000% since then. It's like in 4 seasons, So it's been a pretty cool ride for sure.
Nice. Can you tell us can you give us a brief rundown of what those 17 other books were? Like, what were the standouts from that collection?
Sustainable Market Farming was a great one. JM's book. I'm going to have to dig them out of my memory, man. Curtis Stone's book. Some of them were related to farming, but not directly. So they were like environmental, and they were about, so some of like, Elaine Inham's books, on composting and biological farming. Also like Jeff, Lowenfels, I think his name is. Jeff Lowenfels. He has 2 books, one on, teaming with nutrients and teaming with microbes. He has 3. Teaming with microbes, teaming with nutrients, and teaming with fungi. And I read all 3 of those. So I don't remember exactly what they all were.
Yeah, that's all good. So let's I do want to talk about the kind of nuts and bolts of your no-till methods. Can you give us kind of start to finish a how do you break ground to how do you flip beds kind of rundown of your no-till system?
Yeah, so to break ground the very first time, especially here in Colorado, it requires, we turn over the ground, we till it. We break it up and till it. So that's the very first time, and then that's the very last time. Like, we don't even own a tiller. If we want to expand, we'll go and rent a tiller. We'll break that ground, and then we'll return that tiller. We're not going to till ever again. And so what we do is our system has been probably not the best system, because it's an inpatient system. If I were to put compost down and then tarp it and like wait a year, I probably wouldn't even have to till. I could just get right in or 2 years or something like that. But I don't have the time for that. So our system has been mow it extremely short, like burn the ground, to where there's nothing left. And then we'll load up compost, so 3 to 6 inches of compost on that plot. We'll till it deep, and then we'll form our beds. Once we have that, we'll never till again. So we do things like tarping, we do things like flame weeding, very minimal flame weeding, but we do flame weeding. We use a tilther, which I'm sure you're familiar with and a lot of your listeners are familiar with, which basically just agitates the first inch of soil so that we're not disturbing the worms, etc. When we break that ground, we put the compost on, form our beds, we will water it, and we'll actually add worms to that plot. But then from then on, I mean, it's plant, weed by hand, crop out, so, you're removing the crop out of there and harvesting. And then we'll take, like, wheel hose and we'll run them up and down the bed a couple of times. And we'll leave as many roots in the ground as possible. That's so important for the exudates, the microbes, etc., and not disturbing the habitat, the soil food web. And so we'll run up and down with the wheel hoe or a stirrup hoe or whatever, and then we'll pull out all the topped greens or the topped vegetables, whatever there is, and then we'll add more compost. And sometimes, depending on if it's winter or summer, it's all based on biology. In the summertime, we will actually use a tilther, and we'll go ahead and tilt it, and then we'll seed into that, or we'll transplant into that. I forgot the broad fork. Of course, we're going to use a broad fork. We're going to run down, aerate that soil every time that we turn over a bed. Every single time, even if it's a 30-day crop, we're going to aerate that soil. But when we use the broad fork, it's actually it's a skill, because a lot of people, they stick it in 12 inches and they pull it all the way back until that soil basically just gets destroyed and turned over. We don't do that. We're just pulling it back just enough to see the earth crack, so that the structure of the soil is intact, the fungi of the soil is intact, the bacteria, the worms, all of that stuff is all intact. And then, so we'll move down that bed every 12 inches using that broad fork. Then we'll put on the compost. Then we'll tilt it if we need to, or just rake it. Again, this is in the summertime. And then we'll plant into that. In the winter time, we do the same process, but we will tilt it immediately after broad forking, and then we're gonna add the compost on top and make a nice 2-inch or 1-inch bed of compost on there, nice and smooth. And then we'll roll it, both in the summer and the winter. We use a roller that we got from Johnny's, and with some weights on it, it makes a really nice, flat, level seed bed. And so it's different in the summer than it is in the winter, based on biology.
And did I hear you say you were adding worms as well? How does that work?
Yeah, so I'll literally just order worms. We don't need to order worms anymore because we actually grow our own worms now. But we'll take our worms and we'll add them to the field. Thousands and thousands of them. We'll basically just grab handfuls of them and we'll place them along the beds, generally like 50 feet apart. Just big clumps, and then you'll plant them. You pull back the soil, put the worms in, cover them up, and then they just spread out, and they'll repopulate, and they will just give you worm castings galore. So once we have the beds in place, and we have that compost on there, then there's nothing we have to do. We have the worm castings, and then we have more compost, and then we do compost teas and stuff like that. But yeah, they're our number one fertilizer, those worms.
Nice. So where are you all getting your compost?
So we make our own compost. We actually have a whole bunch of different systems that we've been testing over the years. We'll also get it from Dawn's Garden Shop, which is local and tested and all that stuff. And so we will buy it from them, especially if we're going to be expanding. Now, for maintenance, we're using all of our own, and we really don't have to use the local compost very much anymore because we're not expanding and growing. We're just using what we have. Now how do we make it? We make it out of, vegetable scraps and weeds. We also have the alpaca manure, and we have the chicken manure and bedding. And so we'll mix all of that together. Oh, and also we have a big composting project. That's a community composting project where people will bring their scraps to the CSA drops and pickups in the farmers markets, which we're not doing anymore, but they would do that. And then we also have a lot of people bringing them out to the farm. So they'll bring their goat bedding, their leaves, their grass clippings, and all their food scraps. No meat, of course, but everything else. And we'll take all that and we'll compost it. And a lot of people get really concerned. They say, well, how do you know that there's not chemicals on that grass or in their food? What if it's GMO food or whatever? I'm not concerned about that, and nobody should be concerned about that if you're doing composting correctly. So there's been over 100 studies that have shown that within 6 months, even things like uranium can actually be removed, not just removed, like completely, like obliterated, destroyed, and no longer even there. It's not even like chelated by the microbes. It's actually destroyed. And so it doesn't matter if it's GMO or chemicals or whatever. That compost, if it's done correctly, will have no chemicals, no residue, no toxicity in it. And so we'll send that away, get that tested, and then we'll use that on our crops as long as it passes. So yeah, we're making our own compost. We are buying from a local source as well occasionally, much less now.
Hey, y'all, just going to jump in here real quick and tell you about a cool new project we have in the works called NotillGrowers.com. This is a website that aggregates all the information out there about no-till market gardening into one location, as well as generating original content from farmers like Yosef and others, exclusive for the website, diving into detail into their systems. There will also be a forum to discuss no-till growing and the occasional Ask Me Anything with successful growers. You can get more info by going to notillgrowers.com and signing up for the newsletter or following us on Instagram at notillgrowers. We will launch the first of the year into space, internet space. Okay, I'm done. Sorry. Back to Yosef. So you do some really great videos for your YouTube page and for your farm. And one of them I saw was that you have this composting system that's kind of in the same vein as the Johnson Sioux bioreactor, but it's just a regular compost pile. Can you kind of describe that system and how it's working?
Yeah, so we actually have 2 Johnson Sioux bioreactors, and that we just had built for us from some friends. So we want to definitely move into using those. I just haven't had the time to build them myself. So in place of building those in the middle of summer, when I decided to create something that looked very similar to the Johnson Sioux bioreactor with what I had lying around, and I didn't have the time to build it, so I just threw it together. And what it is, and of course everybody can go to YouTube or whatever and check out that video, but it's a no-turn aerated compost pile, and the aeration is the most important. And so what we did was we basically have all 4 sides are open to air, and then it's a 4 by, I want to say like 12, 4 by 15, is the dimensions of the tile. And, we're layering it, we're putting it in there, we're mixing it all together. And as we're doing that, we have these pipes that go in. I don't remember exactly how many we have, but the pipes are within 2 feet of each other. It's actually like 20 inches of each other, and 12 inches from the outside. It's actually more like 10 inches. So what they found was that the proverbial biologists, etc., or whoever, have found that oxygen can actually can permeate into a compost pile 12 inches. So wherever the edge of your compost pile is, if it's open to oxygen, you can get oxygen all the way 12 inches into that pile. So the way that we designed it is all those pipes, they all have holes in them, and they're within 1 foot of oxygen at all times. And so in that video, I said, I'll do a follow-up video after I get it tested and stuff like that. Well, I just haven't had time to do that follow-up video. I haven't had time to do any videos lately. But I will tell you that it has turned out fabulously. It's just like the Johnson 2 bioreactor. And I know that because I actually know David Johnson. He's right here, about 4 hours from me, and I had lunch with him a couple years back, and he's actually the person who rocked my world when it came to biological farming and agriculture. And he described to me exactly what we should be looking for with the Johnson 2 bioreactor, and that's exactly what I'm getting out of this. It's super exciting. And so I'm even more excited to see the actual bioreactors in place, which we haven't built, we just haven't filled them yet. And so that'll be really cool. I'll do some videos on that too.
Nice. I want to talk just a little bit about your soil there. What is the soil like? Are you dealing with a lot of rock and clay? I grew up in Colorado, actually was born there, and I can't really picture that part of Colorado.
It's a small world, man.
Yeah.
So it's terrible. I mean, it's Colorado Springs is a little bit different, right? Because like they truck in stuff, and wherever you grew up, you probably, you had fake lawn, not fake lawn, but you probably had a lawn and stuff like that, and that's the way Colorado Springs is. But out here, there's not a lot of stone, but gosh, it's clay. And there's no, I mean, there's been people that have lived out here their whole life, and they're like, I've never seen a worm. It's insanely bad. It's as close to a definition of dirt as you can get. I mean, we are in the desert. We're 6,500 feet up. Windy as all get out. I mean, we average, I think the average is like 26 miles per hour, average wind speed out here, which is just ridiculous. The windiest city in the country is Boston, and I think it's an average of 18 miles per hour. So it's very, very, very windy out here. It's very cold out here. The extreme temperatures are out here. It'll be a 75-degree day in the middle of winter, and then it'll go down at night to -10. It's crazy. So the extremes are nuts. And so none of it, and there's no water. So in the past year, we averaged, we received 6 inches of water. Our average out here is 11. So it's the desert for sure. And so that does not, bode well for healthy soil. And so what we do have here is basically, it's not alive. It's dead. This used to be old potato country, and they just destroyed it, and then it turned in. So once they destroyed it from all the tilling and chemicals, etc., then they went to grazing animals on it, and they just overgrazed it. So the soil here is absolutely unbelievably bad. I had an old video like 3 years ago or something of me taking a piece of rebar. Yeah, did you see this one?
I don't think I've seen this one yet. No.
It's old. It's like way you gotta scroll through all the videos. And I put this rebar in soil, like native soil, and I was like put all my weight on it. I was jumping on it. I couldn't get it even a quarter of an inch into the soil. It's hard as a rock. And then 2 feet next to it is where our garden started. And we had only been there for 1 year. And I had never tilled. I had only put compost and mulch on top of there. And I took that rebar and it just sunk down to my knuckles. And it's really cool what you can do. So yeah, we have terrible native soil. But with biology, that can all change. You use compost, using cover, so whether that's cover crops or mulch, and then moisture, and then using biology to increase those carbon chains in the soil, and it goes down deep now. I mean, we have really good soil where we're growing, but yeah, the native soil is terrible, and people come out here. In fact, I had somebody from Utah come out for a few days to intern with us and just learn from us and work with us. And he came out here and he said, man, I feel so much better about myself. I said, why is that? He said, because the weather in Utah is bad. But dude, this is like, how the heck are you doing? It's really bad out here. So that's encouraging. That's encouraging to any of your listeners that you can sit there and try to find the perfect land and the perfect layout and the perfect property, et cetera. But the reality is, if you put in the effort, if you put in that biology, you can make things change, and you can grow some really, really good food. So.
Yeah, so I want to hear about, okay, two questions. Let's just start with the first one, the water situation. So there are a lot of water right issues in Colorado. So what is your water situation, and how does that work?
Can we just talk about something positive? I'm like, oh, everything's terrible. The soil's terrible. The weather's terrible. The wind is terrible. But yeah, the water rights are the toughest in the country, and that's just a fact. I think it's it might be the only state left that doesn't allow rainwater harvesting. It's ridiculous. They don't allow you to do anything, so they're not getting any more wells. Plus, we've overpumped and all that stuff. So without getting into a long story here in Colorado regarding our water rights, we almost got shut down 2 years ago because we didn't have the right permitting and all that stuff, even though we had, and that's the other thing with Colorado, they're all confused. I had called DWR, Denver Water Resources, basically our main water control authority, and asked them, hey, this is the kind of well I have. Can I grow a farm? And he said, sure, no problem, as long as you're within these parameters. Well, I followed the parameters, no problem. Next thing you know, somebody, a fellow farmer, believe it or not, called and reported us for having not the right water rights, because he was upset that, I don't know if it was a jealousy thing, a competition thing or what, but he reported us. We got a letter from the state saying, cease or desist, or you get $500 fine. And it's like the middle of August, and we're like, what the heck are we supposed to do? Long story short, we were very lucky. We had a neighbor who had commercial water, and he wasn't using it. He had like 13 acre feet. And so after spending about $12,000 of actual physical infrastructure and lawyer fees and application fees and all of that stuff, we were lucky enough to get water, commercial water for our farm, but not everybody's that lucky. We do a lot of interns. We have a lot of interns on our farm. Right now we have 5 that are ongoing. And one of the first discussions I talk to people about is, so you want to farm, why do you want to farm here, number one? The weather, all of that stuff. But number 2, are you aware of the water rights? And they're like, oh, yeah, we'll have this type of well. I'm like, well, nope, that's not going to work. They're like, so what are we going to do? And I'm like, well, these are your options. You can truck in water, which is going to be ridiculously expensive, prohibitively expensive. And then, or you can, try to drill your own well, and it would have to be a commercial well that would have to go down a minimum. I believe right now the minimum is 15 or 1,600 feet. So you're talking, $70,000 to $80,000 just for a well, and then you have to bring in, 3-phase electrical and things like that. So it's very, very difficult to get water, to be approved for water, and then even if you have approval, then you got to drill that well, and never mind starting the farm. Farms are expensive. So starting out like that with, $150,000 well is, it doesn't really create accessibility for new farmers, for sure.
Yeah, wow, that is a sad story.
It's very sad.
So then let's just talk a little bit about your irrigation. Are you using, now that you have commercial water, are you using overhead, or are you using strictly drip? Like, are there still restrictions on your watering in that way?
I'm not worried about the restrictions because I'm so efficient with my water. This year we only used, we were in the middle of the worst drought, I think ever. It was pretty close to ever. It's not 50 years or something like that. For a very, very long time, it was the worst drought, specifically where I am. heck, I got 6 inches of water. And we hit 107 degrees multiple times and over 100 degrees, I think it was like 12 times this year. So you can imagine the requirements for water, 6 inches of rain, 100 plus degrees most of the summer, requires a lot of water. But we've figured out how to be as efficient as possible by using row covers, hoop houses, and mulches and things like that. And then also the variety of crop and just pinpointing and really monitoring and measuring the water that we use. And so this year we've only used less than an acre and a half foot of water, and half of that was, not half, but a lot of that was from when we were setting it up and we were flushing the system out, and then we had a whole bunch of different issues that occurred, and we wasted a ton of water at the beginning. But to use 1.5 acre feet of water during that time is pretty good. So how we do is we do overhead, but it's not traditional overhead. It's wobblers. We use XL wobblers, and there was 2 white paper studies on these wobblers that showed a 92+% efficiency. That's close to drip. Drip is anywhere from 94 to 99% efficient. The 99 I don't believe. 99 would be only for, if it's under cover, under mulch, and pinpointed at a tree root or something like that. Other than that, drip is, I wouldn't even say it's 94% efficient, but that's what they say. And drip's not very good for intensively growing crops, because, especially if you're direct seeding. Now, if you're going to transplant those, then drip can work a lot better. But drip has to spread out, so you need to actually run it longer in order for it to spread out, in order to germinate, et cetera, and it doesn't, go straight down, which is what it's supposed to do. And so if you have deep-rooted plants, if you have tomato plants or squash plants or trees or bushes, single plants that are spaced out, then drip is fantastic. Otherwise, if you're doing intensively spaced crops, you have the labor for drip is just silly. Every time you're turning over a 30-day bed, and direct seeding radishes or something, and you're turning it over every 30 days, you have to move that drip, and it becomes, laborious. But then, you have to run that water longer. So we actually done trials. I've had traditional overhead, I've had drip, I've had exclusively drip, then I had the wobblers, and now we're kind of a mix. And we've done trials on our property, and we found that if our beds are 100 foot long, we can do 8 beds with 1 set of wobblers, or 1 set of 4. So they're 25 feet apart. On one side, we have 4 beds. On the other side, we have 4 more beds. So we can do 8 100-foot beds with 4 wobblers, and we run that per hour. And then next to it, we did drip irrigation. Now, with drip irrigation, we only did 6 beds because it takes a lot more water to run through those drip tape, and we had 3 drip tapes per bed. So 6 beds, 3 drip tapes per bed versus 8 beds with 4 wobblers. It ended up being, I believe, 8.5 gallons per minute with the drip tape and 6.5 gallons per minute with the wobblers. And the wobblers have 100% coverage, and we could run them for 35 minutes and get a really good soaking, whereas the drip tape, in order to get the same coverage and the same germination rate, we would have to run that for multiple times a day for about an hour, at least. So it's a huge difference. Everybody thinks like, oh, drip. Well, drip is not always the most efficient. And so that's why it's very important that, like people like Curtis Stone, he talks about my context. It's not the same for everybody, and it's not the same in every environment. And just because someone says, the studies are out there, oh, drip, it doesn't mean that that's the most efficient in all agricultural systems. So yeah, we have a mixture. We definitely do a mixture, and we monitor that really, really well.
Nice. I want to hear about those greenhouses, especially in the context of the wind issue that you have there. So can you tell us what your greenhouse situation is, how many you have, and how you're holding them down?
Yeah, so we're actually putting up number 11 as we speak. Well, I'm speaking, and I have a team of people putting up number 11 right now. And they're all held down with rope. I've built all of them myself. So I've bent all the bars. I pick up it's chain link fencing, so top rail. And I created a form. I know you can purchase a form, but I created a form to bend those, and I bend them all the pipes, and they are 20 foot by 100 feet. Some of them are 24 feet by 110. So I have two 24 by 110s. I have one which is going to be number 12, which is 24 feet by 60 feet, and then I have I think like 8 more. A couple different lengths, but they're mostly like 20 feet, 24 feet, and I built them all out of that chain link. And then for the purlins, I have purlins on the sides, purlins on the tops, some bolts, and then we purchased the plastic, throw it over. They all have baseboards. They're fully built out greenhouses, but we don't use any heat. And then we take ropes and we toss them crisscross over each other, down the way, similar to the way Farmer's Friend does it. And now we actually have a couple of Farmer's Friends hoop houses as well, which we're trialing to see how the wind holds up with them, and they seem like they're doing pretty good so far. But the greenhouses themselves, again, they're custom constructed. The windows and doors, everything's just made by me. The windows are plywood and a little latch hook. So very simple, some hinges and some plywood. And we do classes on how to build these. It's really cool because we could build these for $1,500 to $2,500 a piece, which saves us just a ton of money. And those windows that are made out of plywood, I might have to replace them every 4 years or something. But gosh, the plywood's like it's $5 per window. So it's really worth it to me to not have to spend the big money. We don't have any roll-up sides, and the reason why is because our end walls, the windows are so big that wind kind of just goes in and out of them. And then we also use shade cloth over them. We use a 40% shade cloth here in Colorado. We could actually probably get away with like a 50% or a 60% because we get so much intense sun. But yeah, we definitely use a 40% shade cloth. And in the winter, and we grow 365 days a year. Again, being regenerative, again, caring about sustainability and environmental stewardship, we don't use any fossil fuels to heat our greenhouses. We don't use any heat at all. We use an Elliott Coleman style. It does get down to -10, -20 degrees here. And so what we'll do is we'll take a blanket. It's called Agribon row cover that you can purchase from Johnny's or whatever. And we double hoop our greenhouses. So within our greenhouses, we have a whole bunch of little hoops on each one of the beds. The beds are 30 inches wide. And then we have this row cover. We do AG 70, which is extremely heavy. It only has a 30% light transmission, but it's very, very, very heavy to keep that heat in. And so what happens is during the day, we take the row cover off, and it allows the soil to get nice and warm, and the plants get light, and we can irrigate, all of that stuff. Then at night, we put the row cover back on. That soil is nice and warm, the plants are nice and warm, and so we've seen -10 degrees outside, and it still be 26 to 30 degrees underneath those tunnels. And so obviously we're growing like cold weather crops and stuff. So, I don't know if that answers your question or if I did that in detail enough, but that's pretty much it. And they work really, really well.
No, that's pretty good. And if there is one nice thing to say about Colorado, it is a sunny state.
That's true.
Yeah. I want to hear, just before we stop, I want to hear a little bit about your sort of pay what you can model and how that works exactly. Do you have a suggested price for the CSA and then people pay somewhere within that range, or how do you navigate that?
Yes, that's exactly right. So at the farmers market, well, one thing we did is I mentioned earlier that we have a nonprofit, right? So the nonprofit is called Ahavah Community Initiative, and we've got it's separate from Ahavah Farm, but in the vision statement, it talks about a partnership with Ahavah Farm and stuff like that. So what we do is, and we just started this year. In years past, we just allowed people to pay whatever they could afford, not a big deal. And if people paid extra, then we would keep that. If people paid less, we would be fine with that, and it would kind of balance out. And so what we did this year was we created a nonprofit, but then at the farmers market, we have a big jar, and it says on the jar, it says, please donate, I think your change or whatever to feeding people in need, to our Pay What You Can Afford program. 100% of, the money in this jar basically it goes to our nonprofit Ahavah Community Initiative to feed people in need. And so with that nonprofit, we're able to do donations every year. In fact, we just had our board meeting this week, and we decided we're going to do 10 donations for the spring, and then we'll do donations for the spring, donations for the summer, the fall, and the winter. The spring, coming up, we're going to do 10, and that's going to all be financed through ACI, Ahavah Community Initiative. That's for people that really just can't afford anything, people that are on SNAP, people that have cancer, people that have children that are on cancer and they can't work because they're trying to take care of the kids, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of really terrible stories out there, and people are in serious need. So we're very proud of ACI and that we can do that. It's really exciting. In addition to that, our farm donates, just, me, my wife and I, my family, we donate a certain number according to our budget, whatever we can afford, to people in need as well. In addition to that, we allow people to pay whatever they can afford. So actually on the website, on the registration page for the CSA, it says, are you having financial difficulty? Please don't allow finances to get in the way of having access to pure food. Please contact us. And so we allow people to contact us and say, hey, look, this is my story. I can't afford this or this. Can you do a payment plan? Would you take less? And we're like, sure, whatever works for you. And I don't know, man, it works. It works. And, in some way I probably lose out somewhere, but the reality is it balances out because there's a lot of people that support us just for that. And that's not the reason why I do it, right? But we're very sincere about our mission, about impacting people and making a difference. And I think it's pretty transparent, and we've built our business around that. And there are people that support us just for that. And there's a lot of people still write checks. They'll say, here, this is for a donation. Well, thank you very much. And so they'll give us a donation for CSA, for a family in need. And so we're able to offer those in addition to all the other things that I just talked about. And, we do fundraising and stuff like that. And it's a really neat program. We're the only ones in Colorado that do it. Or actually, I think there might be a small little farm up at Highlands Ranch that does it. But other than that, there hasn't been anybody that does Pay What You Can Afford. And we're really happy about doing that program. So I think it works out.
Yeah, that's super cool. I think that's a challenge a lot of times, especially for farmers who want to get their food to anybody who wants it. Finding ways to do that are still, viable for the farm.
Mm-hmm. That nonprofit, man, I'm telling you, starting that nonprofit was a really good idea because it's allowed us to reach so many more people, and the donations are 100% tax deductible, and it just worked out really, really well. I think in years past we might have walked away from the farmers market with, maybe giving away a little bit and losing out a little bit on our crop, but it wasn't that big of a deal. Now that we're much bigger, the nonprofit just works out real well.
That's great. All right, I would be remiss, though, if I didn't ask you about the Fodder Tech before I let you go. So tell us a little bit about the Fodder Tech, how you're using it, what it is, describe it to the listeners, how you're using it, and how it works.
It is the raddest thing we've ever done. It is so cool. Everybody needs to get the Fodder Tech. So it's a fodder system. The Fodder Tech is the brand. Okay, so Fodder Tech is the company, and what they do is they sell these climate-controlled connexes. They're fully insulated. They're fully sealed, so there's no water can get to the metal and rust things and whatever. So you can spray water wherever you want. It's not a problem. And then on the inside, there's all the pumps and the water tanks, and then the fodder system itself. And it's basically a big racking system. You can see a video of it on my YouTube channel. And we put our seed, so we soak our seed, we put our seed in these trays, and then it automatically waters 4 times a day. And literally all you got to do is it becomes this big mat of seed and this tall grass, and it's hard to explain over the phone without actually seeing it. But it's you pull this big mat out, and it's like 35 pounds of just food that grew for the animals, and it's so cool. We use barley grass, and the barley grass is amazing because it has everybody knows about wheatgrass, right? But this is barley grass, and barley grass is less bitter. It has more nutrients overall, and it's a complete protein profile. And so it has, I forgot what the number is. I think there's 104 essential nutrients that our bodies need, and I think it had 102 of those essential nutrients. So it's pretty radical system that grows this amazingly nutritious food, and we just give that to the chickens. We give it to our horse, our alpacas, etc. We also will sell or give our wheatgrass to the CSAs, and they love it. And so we will just grow it, and we'll harvest the wheatgrass from the top. We'll package that. We'll sell it. We'll give it to our CSA. They love it. And then we'll take the mat of seed that's still left there, and we'll give that to the chickens, and they love that. So I'm getting. Not only am I saving about $1,500 a month on chicken feed by doing this, I'm also gaining, depending on how often I want to do wheatgrass. I mean, you're talking with 200 members, 200 containers. It's $4 a container. $800 to $1,000, which is actually 230 members. So $1,000 a week if I wanted to give them wheatgrass every week. So I'm saving $1,500. I'm making an extra $1,000 a week, and then we also do pea shoots in there, and the pea shoots are rocking it. It's very exciting to see these pea shoots blow up in 10 days because it's completely climate controlled and everything. We're getting 12-inch tall pea shoots that we're able to harvest, give to our CSAs because they go crazy for the pea shoots. I mean, there are people that are like, if I don't bring the pea shoots, they're like, where are the pea shoots? What's going on? We need the pea shoots. They love them. And so we'll harvest those pea shoots, give them to the CSA almost on a weekly basis. And then we'll give the peas, that mat of seed to the chickens, and they love it. And then in that controlled building, we also have extra space. In that extra space, we have racks. And those racks, we do seedlings. So it's just an awesome system. It cost us $20,000. They delivered it on a truck. We had to just have a foundation poured, which cost me about $1,000, or some pads anyway. And then we just had to wire it into our 220, and it automatically cools and heats, and it automatically waters. It's pretty radical. I'm very, very happy with it. So even if I wasn't saving the $1,500 a month on feed, I'm making an extra, I don't know, $10,000 a month between pea shoots and wheatgrass, and then also the seedlings and all that stuff that I'm doing in there and the other microgreens. So very cool. I definitely recommend it.
Very cool. Yosef Camire, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, man, it's my pleasure. Hope you enjoyed the podcast, and it was good to talk to you. So let's do it again sometime.
Definitely. All right, if you enjoyed Yosef, please give his farm a follow on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, or wherever you like to kick it. It's Ahavah Farm, Ahavah. It's kind of palindromic, but it's not really. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your friends, and check out the Patreon page. If this podcast is adding any value to your world, consider signing up. $2 a month, $5, whatever it's worth. I have no idea who doesn't sign up, but I do know who does, and they are awesome. Oh, next week's podcast will come out a few days early so you can listen to it on your way to family events. Or heck, just subject your family to it on Christmas Eve. Make it a new tradition. Just throwing out ideas. All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye.